Hello and welcome to this episode of the Off the Shelf podcast, the book podcast brought to you by the Conference Board. Today we'll be talking about how pets and their owners and suppliers and carers are transforming the American culture, economy, and nation. At least according to Mark Cushing, who is author of the new book, Pet Nation. Hello, Mark. Thanks for joining the podcast.
Great to be with you. Look forward to it.
Wonderful. My name is JP Kuehlwein. I'm principal at Überbrands Consulting, teach marketing at Columbia University, and most relevant to this particular context, I lead the Marketing Institute here at the Conference Board. So today, we'll be talking about the fastest growing part of the US population. And yes, that is the pet population. It has almost doubled since 1998, progressing at about 5 times the speed of the human population of the US. We're talking, when we talk pets, mainly about domesticated animals and mainly about dogs and cats, of which there are an estimated 60 to 85 million each. Depending on the source, and probably Mark's going to tell us about why that wide variance exists. And they are present in about 65 or so percent of U.S. households today in 2020, depending on whether the data comes from the insurance industry, veterinarians, the American Pet Product Association. And that points us to 2 facts. One, there are a lot of those pets. And 2, there's entire industries that have been created to serve this very fast-growing population and obviously profit-generating population. Otherwise, there wouldn't be industry. Also, when we talk pets, we talk about humans. We talk about owners. We talk about pet lovers looking for companionship, feeling better, gaining confidence. You see where I'm going with this, how I create the link with the Conference Board, which might have been a question mark in your mind going in. Pets are the economy. Pets are culture. Pets are human. Pets are about business, confidence, and all the things we're talking about when we talk about insights for the future. But before we get to all of this, let's get to our author. His name is Mark Cushing. He is founder and CEO of the Animal Policy Group, an advocacy group that works with veterinarians, pet food makers, researchers studying human-pet interaction, and I quote, which is there to improve access for Americans to pets. Mark has had a long-time career as a political strategist, a lobbyist, a corporate executive, a litigator, before he turned to animal-related advocacy about 15 years ago. And he provides today strategic advice and services to clients across industry and government in all things pet. Mark, welcome again to this podcast. Where do we find you?
Well, I live in Paradise Valley, Arizona, which is right next to Scottsdale. So it's going to be a cool 110 degrees here today. So it's nice to be inside talking with you.
What an aspirational name, though, before you mentioned the temperature. Paradise.
Yeah, I literally found paradise. Isn't that all of our goal? So my wife chairs anatomy at Mayo Clinic's medical school out here. So it was a great excuse for me to be based in a nice part of the world.
A good excuse indeed. Now, talking about goals and paradise and aspirations, you have dedicated at least your professional life, I don't know, are you a pet owner? We'll talk about that, to advocating, for people's access to pets. And now you've written this book about the US as a pet nation. Where does this passion, this interest come from? The love affair that changed America is actually the subtitle of your book.
Well, I tell people, straightforward, as a lawyer, I'm a hired gun. I was called in 2005 to get a political challenge solved for the pet industry in Congress. And I had never planned to spend any professional time in this world. I've always enjoyed pets, cats and dogs mainly. And probably a lot of your listeners could repeat the same story. I had success. It led to the phone ringing. And suddenly, in a matter of 2 or 3 years, I was immersed full time, mainly representing the companies that service the pet industry. Zoetis, largest pharmaceutical supplier in the world, Mars Veterinary, the largest veterinary practices, Royal Canin, food brands. I represent about 10 veterinary colleges. So I ended up just being across the pet healthcare, the pet and animal welfare landscape. And it's been a great run. So I'm going to keep going. And the book made sense because what folks need to understand is that it's not just that pets are fun and you have kind of a fuzzy, warm feeling for them. Their whole relationship to U.S. culture and society and ultimately economics has been transformed in one generation. And, the best way to think of it, JP, is this. You hear a phrase sometimes that pets went from the backyard to the bedroom. 75% of all American pets sleep on top of their owners' beds. But what also happened was dogs went right out the front door to every corner of this country. And 25 years ago, you wouldn't be on a plane, on a train. You wouldn't have walked into a store. You wouldn't go to a workplace and see pets everywhere. And it's become an accepted fact. And it's changed everything about how we interact with pets, but it's also built this marvelous. And actually, there's no end in sight to the ability of this pet economy to grow and to be sustained. So that'll be a great topic for you and I to jump into.
Interesting. I mean, before we get to the economics, which I definitely want to talk, tell us a little bit more about this human affinity, if not for some obsession with pets. You talk a bit about history. You talk a lot about cultural context. Can you give us some juicy bits that provide the insight and illustrate why and how there is this strong relationship with pets across nations also?
Yeah, very much. And this is now the subject of thousands of peer-reviewed scientific and medical journals. So it's not just a gut instinct or an intuition. It's called the human-animal bond. And the manner in which people engage with pets, and it's mutual between pets and people, your oxytocin levels increase and your cortisol levels decrease. And that combination reduces stress and essentially is the foundation for a person to be in a good mood, basically enjoy yourself. So there's a physical, a physiological activity occurring when you talk with your dog and when you play with your cat or when you ride a horse. I mean, the point is it's more than just I'm having a good time and I'm not sure why. So you've got now literature covering serious circumstances like autism, children before heart surgery, isolated seniors, kind of across the board, where the presence of pets improves the situation. It also has been determined, JP, in studies, some of which I was involved in Perth, Australia, San Diego, Portland, Oregon, and Nashville, that the number one factor generating social capital, sort of building communities, it's not churches, it's not schools, it's pets, literally the presence of pets. In Manhattan, you walk down the street, two people each have a dog on a leash. Without the dog on the leash, they probably don't even make eye contact. With dogs on the leash, they'll stop. They'll recognize each other's dogs. They'll begin a conversation. They won't talk about income, cars they drive, house in the Hamptons, any of that. Right, it's a very and that. So what's happened is that's been magnified nationally in 25 years, and all sorts of factors I discuss in the book, accelerated it. But what's interesting is it's a rural phenomenon, suburban, urban. I mean, wherever you are, this occurred. So that's why I coined the term pet nation.
Now,
to capture it.
One phenomenon that I kind of read through these observations was that there have always been pets. I mean, since we know recordings of cultures being done, pets have appeared in stories, in paintings, etc. However, as you point out, it seems that increasingly we are humanizing pets in terms of they sleep with us, they eat with us. We make special meals for them, where maybe just a generation ago, it would have been considered at best weird to sleep with your pet and to feed it at your table with specially prepared dishes that might cost as much or maybe even more than the dish that you eat personally. Where does this drive to humanize pets, on top of just being companions, come from in your experience?
Well, what's interesting, there have been three eras, if you will, with respect to companion animals. For thousands of years, literally thousands of years, they basically were either sanitation workers in the case of cats, killing and catching and eating mice and rats, or dogs working on farms or in breweries or just kind of industrial fashion, except for the elite. And I mean really the elite of the elite. And then in the U.S., kind of post World War II, JP, they came to the second era, which was pets, as I call them, accessories. They were around. They, in your backyard, cats would roam. Dogs typically roamed free. You wouldn't see the sidewalks of New York covered with them, or a dog walker with 8 Great Danes marching down, Fifth Avenue. And that wasn't the case, but they were there. They weren't mistreated, but they really weren't special. And then a number of factors in the last 20 years, some digital, some viral, some media driven by, believe it or not, car advertising, and this awareness of the ability of a pet to just make the situation better. People went from no pets to 1, brought it in the house, to 2 dogs, not 1 dog, because dogs like companions. Same thing with cats. And the combination of digital and this, if you will, appreciation of the human-animal bond was a trigger. And we could talk more about that if you'd like. But this third era now is where we are. And the key, if I could say this, it's not a fad. This isn't like Beanie Babies or the hula hoops. People aren't taking their pets back to a shelter. Pet population is growing and people want more, not fewer pets. And there's nothing that I can see that is going to slow this down. And that's obviously exciting for people involved in pet.
Two related questions here. It's a fascinating subject. One is, you say it's not a fad, but there are fads within this very long-term trend, or even call it cultural evolution, which is, you have the 100 Dalmatians as a film, and then people run for Dalmatian puppies, and a couple of years later, there are tons of Dalmatian puppies in shelters. At least it seems, the way the numbers are reported. So there seems to be a faddish aspect to it. The other question I have is, it seems that dogs and cats have the upper hand. Have you discovered a particular reason why it's dogs and cats and not maybe, rats or snakes or pigs that are apparently cute and intelligent as well?
Well, people have in America, a lot of Americans have pets, including a 19-foot reticulated python. There are not a lot of them, but your neighbor might have one and you don't know it. So there are other pets, and I don't want to shortcut that or sell that. But dogs have a unique ability to kind of unconditionally engage their pet parent or their pet owner, period. I mean, and dogs do it in a way that no other pet can do it, in terms of just saying, when you come home, what are we going to do? Whatever you want to do, I want to do with you. You want to throw the ball? I'll throw the ball for an hour. You want to go for a walk? Anything. I'll sit up on your lap. And they do it in a way that's interacts with people so naturally. Cats, there's a phrase I like, which is dogs have owners and cats have staff. Cats look at you, and I have a cat, or 2 cats rather than a dog. Cats look at you like, what have you done for me lately? You've been home for 30 seconds and I don't see anything improving in my life. I don't see any food. You're not playing with any string, and don't touch me, by the way. Oh, please pet me now. Stop petting me. I'm going to go into this room and don't follow me. And it's so cats pull you in a different way, and they're highly intelligent creatures. I'm not saying other animals aren't, but the combination of their size, a fish in an aquarium, you can have a relationship to a fish and see its eyes and it can see yours, but you just can't engage the way you can with a cat or a dog. And what's ironic, and I think it's pure accident, JP, we have just about the same number of pet cats as pet dogs in America. And I've never seen any scientific explanation of why that accident is the case. But there's roughly 85 to 90 million of each.
What we call the yin and the yang. But we answered one important question, which was, do you have pets? Which one and why? And we see you're a passionate pet parent of 2 cats. Do you have dogs as well?
I have 2 cats and 1 dog. And the dog is
you're complete pet family. Now, you've talked about some, I could call it darker aspects, but they could be potentially helpful as well, aspects of pet ownership where you talk about human-pet relationships from early on, from childhood, and how they are somewhat predictive of later even human-human interaction and relationships. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Great question. And so there have been, again, scores of studies that have shown that many, by many I mean majority, of domestic violent felons or offenders as adults, basically men that physically abuse, rape, murder women, often in domestic relationships, began life as if they were in spring training or exhibition season, abusing animals. And there's a correlation there it's not accidental, it's not incidental. And my daughter, by the way, is a prosecutor of child felony sexual assault offenders. So, I know this world, personally through her experience. So what do we know about that? That's obviously very concerning. Pets don't turn people into violent offenders, but if you see a child that doesn't know how to handle a pet or thinks it's fun to kick a dog or, put a firecracker underneath a turtle and blow it up. I mean, I've seen all these things growing up in rural Oregon where I did. The point is, keep an eye on that kid and understand that you might want to teach that child how to engage a pet, how to enjoy a pet rather than abuse and get your kicks from, harming it, in many cases, killing it. So that's an interesting link. It's also something, JP, that's tied to women that don't report domestic abuse because of their fear, frankly, that the offender, their boyfriend, husband, whomever, will kill their pet. And that happens a lot. So it's intertwined both ways. But I think you can teach kids how to be good with pets. Lots of evidence of that. But keep your eye out if you're someone that thinks it's fun to throw a cat in the air and let it land, where it's not safe.
Right. Let's complete the circle there by turning back to the positive side. Then, of course, pets also known to have therapeutic powers, if you like, way beyond what you described even earlier, working with handicapped children and adults, whether it's dolphins or horses, etc. So all of that to say, I guess the bottom line is pets have always been and have evermore become a very important part of American and human culture overall. And now I make the turn here. And with that, obviously been discovered as a huge territory for business to generate business, to make money. The pet care industry, and again, the numbers vary widely, but the quotes are around $225 billion. And that's just in the US in 2018, and growing at a 4 to 5% rate, which would be the envy of, industries like CPG or others. Campbell's Soup would have been fascinated to have that kind of growth, at least before the pandemic. We'll get to that one also later. Tell us about business creation around pets, the variety of it, the value of it, the premiumization, which are all themes in your book.
Yeah, and it's dramatic. And I think for a decade of the 2 decades I'm talking about, the pet industry and veterinary industry and so forth was skeptical. I think they thought, surely this can't last. And now they've seen that it's a fundamental shift. And it's remarkable. About 7 years ago, there were 5 firms acquiring veterinary practices. There's about 25 to 30,000 veterinary practices in the country. There are now at least 60 firms backed by private equity, many of whom call me and want to talk about the industry often. And I speak at their seminars because they've turned their sights and thought, good God, Americans are all about pets. What can we do about it? How can we be part of this? So you're seeing a lot of money, JP, flowing from Wall Street, from private equity into pet, whether it's nutrition, whether it's veterinary practices, whether it's pharmaceuticals, whether it's diagnostics, software, telemedicine, pet supplies, pet lingerie. I'm not kidding. There is such a thing. So anywhere you look at it, as I like to say, we've gone from kind of an accidental afterthought relationship to pets 25 years ago to very intentional behavior. I want to know more. I'll pay to learn more. I want to feed my pet better food. I'll pay to do that. I want to learn how to train my dog or cat to do things. I'll pay to do that. I want human quality. This is the biggest change. I want human quality and scale of healthcare from my dog and cat, the same that I get for myself, and I'll pay for it. And that's the millennial Generation Z impact. You've seen them say in survey after survey, that's what I want out of pet healthcare. And frankly, pet healthcare wasn't ready for that. And it's an interesting topic, but they just weren't ready to deliver services at that scale, but you're seeing it now.
Right. And we see, it's fascinating. Nobody seems to be watching that space a lot, except for probably the industry itself, of course. But there is even this consolidation and growth of big conglomerates. You mentioned one at the top of the show, which is your customer, Mars Incorporated. Mars has invested in pet veterinary services, in food, of course. We know Royal Canin, but they have many other brands, including Iams now, I think, etc. Pet toys, you were talking about lingerie. I hadn't heard about that one, but I fully believe that. Even technology like putting trackers onto your dog, not only to find the dog or the cat via GPS, but these trackers supposedly are able to measure whether your dog not only is sick right now, has a fever or whatever, but whether there's anything in its behaviors that would indicate it will get a disease. It's fascinating. Do you have some numbers for us in terms of maybe the evolution of average spending of a dog or cat owner over time? Like, how much does a cat owner spend nowadays per year on just their cat?
Yeah, it's hard to get all the numbers you'd like. First of all, it's not quite 2 to 1, but certainly by a factor of 3 to 2 or 5 to 3, people spend more on their dogs on pharmaceuticals, veterinary care, supplements, and so forth than they do on their cat. And that's odd. And the veterinary world's trying to address that. Part of it's because it's not easy to get under a bed and pull a cat out, put it in a crate while it's wailing at you to take it to a veterinarian. So telemedicine is going to change that. So you're seeing people spend $1,000 to $2,000 a year per dog. And by the factor I just said, a little bit less on that per cat. And that number is taking off and is growing, and it's not going to stop. And I'm not saying that with a smile on my face for pet owners, but the truth is, when you want care at the level you get it for yourself, then guess what? Human healthcare is not declining in costs, and veterinary care isn't either. There's a shortage of veterinarians. There's a shortage of veterinary nurses and veterinary technicians. So you've got all the same factors that are at play in human healthcare, which is we don't have enough medical providers. And so, supply and demand tells you what's going to happen there. Go ahead.
No, I was just thinking, it reminds me of a discussion we had just a couple of weeks ago about another book, which was about blue collar work and how there are hidden industries. You're talking about veterinarian nurses and technicians, blue collar jobs, if you can call them that are growth industries where you can find well-paid jobs across the nations. It sounds like it would be the case in this industry as well.
I can't prove this, but there is significant anecdotal data, JP, just down the street from you, that there are dog walkers in Manhattan that make $200,000 a year because they take, on the Upper East Side, they've kind of got an entire block that's their customer base. And I'm sure you see them. You'll see them marching with 8 dogs astride, and those pet owners want those dogs taken care of throughout the day.
Right. No, Chewy delivery on every doorstep, which is obviously the whole dog, not only food, but care of any kind, online delivery. Now, it seems to me also anecdotally, and maybe you have data or at least broader insight, it seems to me that pets and caring for your pet seems to be one of those crisis-proof industries where, if I can't afford a new car this year or, other big ticket items, I will indulge, though, famously, you say, in the lipstick, right? It's that little affordable luxury. It seems that pets also count there. I will not give up on my pet. I will not let my pet down. Is that just myth, or do you see some support for this hypothesis?
100% accurate. And we have the laboratory of the 2008 recession, and people didn't go on vacations. They didn't buy a car. They didn't upgrade they didn't remodel their house, whatever. But they didn't turn to the shelters and say, here, take my dog, take my cat. I can't afford her anymore. You don't see that at all. And it is as close to recession proof as you can get, in part because it's the cheapest medicine to feel good. It's the lowest cost thing possibly in your life that day after day sustains you and provides joy and, collegiality and everything you want to say about it. And why would you give that up? Right. So you can't, you can spend a ton of money on pets, but you don't have to. And I think we're certainly seeing in COVID, we'll probably get to that. The New York Times has suggested maybe as much as a 20% uptick in pet ownership. I think that number is a little high, but I think it's in the 5 to 8% range.
No, it's not all rosy and sugar water. There are discussions going on. Some people find it absurd that, cats and dogs start to, or seem at least to live a better life, a more nourished, entertained, and cared for life than millions of humans in this nation. Other people say, why do you buy new dogs when there's so many dogs in shelters? You should buy a shelter dog rather than a pure breed dog. But before we get to that, we'll create a little cliffhanger here, and we have just a few messages by the conference board, and we'll be right back with this discussion.
Can you, your team, or your company benefit from insights such as the ones provided in this podcast? They are immediately available when you join the conference board, a membership-based think tank that delivers trusted insights for what's ahead. Reaching across industries and geographies, we bring together our noted experts, senior executives from the world's largest companies, and nonpartisan practical research to help you address your most important business issues. Our membership packages are tailored to your organization's unique needs and budget. To learn more about our offerings, go to www.conferenceboard.org and click Join on the top bar to connect with one of our product specialists.
All right, welcome back. We're here with Mark Cushing, who is the author of Pet Nation and knows a lot about pets. This has been fascinating. At the top of this break, I said, it's not all rosy. Some people doubt whether this is a healthy trend, at least the way it develops. I mean, there are people who say, as I said, how come so many pets nowadays seem to be better off, better nourished, better entertained, better cared for than large swaths of the US population? Is that right? Why do we buy brand new bred pets when there's so many in the shelters? In the break, you told me about, pets as perks, as like newfangled, probably tech industry initiated perks for employees, pets as luxury and vanity projects. It can all sound very decadent and kind of, not having human and human welfare in mind in the first place. Is this a first world luxury issue, a rich people kind of area? How do you perceive this criticism, and what's your answer to it if there is one?
For all the questions you just asked in that sentence, I'd probably need an hour. I'll make it real short and simple. Half the cats and dogs in the world are feral. They do run free, if you will, because they don't have a home per se. And that's in the less developed, less successful part of the world. So you can make a broad statement that you have to have a middle class, which we're discovering in China now. You have to have a middle class to have a lot of pets. People acquire pets and they acquire cars. That seems to be the two consumer purchases, if you will, that show up when an economy suddenly has a strong middle class. The middle class in the US, JP, is the backbone of the pet ownership. But there's one statistic I love to share. People with annual incomes of $30,000 or lower own dogs at virtually the same rate as people making $100,000 a year and more. So it's not fair to say that only the rich have pets. And that's not the case. Pet ownership is broadly dispersed from low end to high end. Interestingly, the urban Northeast and the urban hip West Coast own dogs at a lower rate than the middle of the country. So dogs tend to be a bit more of a blue collar, middle income pleasure, if you will.
Maybe there's also a little bit more space in the Middle East to have a dog versus a cat in an apartment.
Well, you think that, though, in New York, people don't just have Shih Tzus like my brother does, near Gramercy Park. They have, big 120-pound dogs. I don't know how they do it, but it seems to be common. So they're not luxury items. But it's easy to look at what people do with pets. And the truth is, the term you use, humanizing pets, I don't call pets children. I don't call them substitutes for children. But there's an aspect of it where people, get their dog a new Halloween costume every year. Now, it's probably not more than a $15 purchase. It does seem a little over the top, right? Couldn't you use that cute outfit from last year again? But they get a kick out of it. Right now, I think the figure that's best I've seen is that 70% of all employees had pets and only 45% have children. So you have, more employees that spend money on pets than spend money on kids because they just have more pets. They're easier to get, and they are less expensive than children. I have 5 kids. I can attest to that. There's not a cat or dog in my life that's cost me anywhere near the pleasure of raising children. But I don't think it's. Go ahead. You go ahead.
No. It all sounds logical, but there seems to be still things that are difficult to reconcile. So, for example, the whole shelter roaming dogs being
let's talk about that
after getting out of fashion. What's your learning on that?
Let's talk about that. First of all, shock alert for your audience. We have a shortage of dogs in America. Now, your people are going, that can't be true. I just watched Sarah McLachlan on a commercial last night for the 100th time telling me how shelters are. There are shelters in the South, there's shelters in the lower Midwest, and there's shelters in the Southwest that have too many dogs and have too high of a euthanasia rate. Most northern shelters, New York City, Boston, Philadelphia, Portland, Seattle, Denver, Minneapolis, Chicago, their dog kennels are empty by Sunday. You can't find a pet. They get their pets, believe it or not, from the South. I call my book, I use that phrase, the Canine Freedom Train. Los Angeles Animal Control sends 2 shipments a week up to Portland, Oregon, and Seattle of dogs that are adopted like that in those 2 cities. So it's not the case. In fact, only 25% of dogs in America come from shelters. So the argument that you have a moral duty to adopt, that you can find any dog you want by just walking over or driving to a shelter, it's just not the case. It is simply not the case.
Let me be the advocate of the not so much pet lovers. Another theme is, you're a strong advocate, and you say that also on your website, of giving everyone the right, in fact, improving access, you say, for everyone to have a pet. Some people would say there are places where pets simply don't fit, where they simply should not be, like cramped quarters, of a high rise that is far from a park, and where owners either don't have the time or don't want to afford to take their pet out. What do you say there? Are there situations where it is right to restrict pet ownership, or should it be totally self-regulated and it's a free-for-all? Everyone does whatever they want. Do they want to have a python in an apartment building? Go ahead.
I think it should be as much of a free market as possible, mindful that you've got an obligation to your neighbors. So I think, and frankly, more and more apartments are pet friendly, but they have areas in the apartment that aren't. And I think that makes good sense. You know who the greatest critic is of pets and their explosion in our culture?
You will tell
Pope Francis I. I'm not kidding. And he chose his name from Francis of Assisi, who was the patron saint of animals. I kid my late mother that he should have changed his name.
Would it make sense? I mean, Francis wants human to human care and despises any kind of replacement for that. So in that sense, I guess that would be a replacement.
Well, he's got a zero-sum theory that I don't get. I mean, I'll use this example. It's like a couple are out watching their young daughter play in a park, and there's a cat with them, and the cat's playing too. They can laugh at the cat doing funny things. It doesn't exhaust their supply of goodwill towards the daughter. They can enjoy both, and it's, to me, it's ultimately a silly argument. He also basically challenges couples who don't have children. Don't think that your pet's going to be around long enough to sustain you at the end of your life. I mean, honestly, I think culture has moved past that argument that everybody has a duty to have a child. So I think critics, should you have pets inside a kitchen in a Manhattan restaurant? No, that's a public health risk. Should a pet be inside of a funeral service? Probably not. So there's still a lot of areas that you can't have pets where you might see a no pets allowed sign. I do predict, and I think it's a good thing, that the number of those areas will shrink, but it won't reduce to zero. That you'll have your place where you can go and there's no pets, right, and you won't be bothered. But that trend is going to continue to grow.
Fascinating. I mean, last but not least, I mean, there is no show anymore without COVID, at least for a while now. But COVID and pets also has been a theme. Some say, well, look where pet ownership leads to. Apparently, pet or animal to human, transmission of viruses is on the rise because we're increasingly closing in on animals physically, geographically, but also bringing them into our homes, ever more exotic ones. And then there are others who say, a pet was my savior during COVID. I think I already know where you net out, but can you give us a little bit of a differentiated argument here around pets and times of health crisis?
Well, pet cats and dogs are not transmitting COVID. Let's get that clear for people. But you're not implying that either, but I just want folks to understand that there are zoonotic diseases that go from, birds to humans, avian bird flu. We had, the mad cow. We've had swine-related issues. So yes, but I think what COVID did was, and I don't think people saw this coming. I didn't. All right. I don't think anybody sat about the second week of March and thought, I bet veterinary practices actually grow 10 to 20% over 2019 in the next 4 months. And they did. Or I bet America's pet dog and cat population grows by 5% or so in the next 4 months. But people sort of stopped by a shelter on their way home to quarantine. And that was interesting. But that really speaks to the human-animal bond side of things. And I think that I don't see how that fundamental changes. I really don't. And I think what you're seeing, as I saw a statistic the other day, JP, where 38% of workers home during COVID with a pet plan to get another pet when they go back to work because they don't want their dog or cat to be alone when they go back to work. So there's going to be a ripple effect beyond just what we've seen in the 5 or 6 months of COVID throughout the country.
Wow. Fascinating. I unfortunately, we've run out of time. We've run over time, but this has been a fascinating conversation here. Who would think, at least for those who are not into pets every day. And I think bringing it back to the conference board and a lot of listeners listening in from a business perspective, it is amazing how Pet Nation, if I want to borrow your title, is a reflection of a growing part of the industry, of the economy, an industry that is growing similar to the tech industry. I mean, a bump during the crisis, unbreakable, it seems, kind of growth, development of platforms, i.e. caring for your pet 360, tech-enabled, and people who are willing to pay significant premium prices. So attractive margins and profits to be made. And then this other aspect that I found fascinating that you touched on continuously, which is in some ways, pets can literally be those canaries in the coal mine or the sniffer dogs, i.e. help us see what's around the corner, what's coming up, what's the future, because to some extent they're reflecting upcoming trends, more broadly evolving behaviors. Do I get that right?
You did, and I'm going to just take 10 seconds to give you my favorite example. It was 3 months before COVID. In the December 2019 Hyundai holiday commercials, they had this famous 30-second commercial that had 5 Hyundai vehicles from tallest to the smallest lined up, and in front of each vehicle was a dog from tallest to smallest. That was the commercial. Who do you think the Hyundai execs thought the viewer was going to look at? Were they going to look at the cars or the dog? You know the answer, dogs. We've reached a point where you can sell a car in America by having people associate a dog with a car.
Sorry to burst your bubble, but that is not new news. I've worked for 25 years in the CPG industry, and we said if you want to put a little bit of engagingness into your ad, you can add one of two things, a puppy or a baby. That's what you do. Okay.
You got it. I know you're right, JP. But it's just...
Mark, thanks again for sharing all those stories, your expertise, insights. It's been really, really fascinating. If people are interested to know more, to read your book, get your thoughts, maybe even engage your services, where should they go? Where's a place that's best to connect with?
Animalpolicygroup.com. You can reach my work business. MarkLCushing.com is my author's website. The book is Pet Nation, The Love Affair That Changed America. And you can get that book, all the usual online and other places, audio, digital, and hardcover. So it's a great industry and great field. So look forward to engaging with folks if they're interested.
Excellent. Thanks again, Mark. And thanks to you, dear listeners, for tuning in. If you found this episode insightful, helpful, fun, then don't be shy. Let everyone know. Of course, you're already subscribed. Think about giving us a good comment and rating, and so on and so on. You know the spiel. Consider also to look up all the other podcasts we do, like the Influencers podcast, or even tune into a webinar. You'll find all of that on the Conference Board website at conference-board.org/podcast for the podcast. And with that, thanks again, Mark. Goodbye, auf Wiedersehen, woof woof, I guess.
All right, take care. Thanks.